totally up to you. You know, we've had these great sessions where the majority of our questions are going to come from our fans. But being that we are in the Hall of Fame, one of my favorite questions for folks, and I do have the microphone so I get to ask the first question. Growing up, who were your heroes? Who were your racing heroes that you had? You know, thinking of all the history of the city and all the racing you've been around.
Well, that's a good question, because I thought you were going to ask me what I do when I have to go to the bathroom. So, that's a better question.
I've heard that other question plenty of times.
Have you seen the new Sports Center commercial with Kevin? Has anybody seen that?
I haven't.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Well, if you haven't, watch ESPN some more. You'll watch it, it's really funny. But who did I look up to? Well, you know, it really all started with my dad, probably more than anyone else. I'm finally getting your question a little deep over there.
That's not a sure time. They came to hear you, not me, trust me.
Okay. Well, it started with my dad. And my dad raced in what would have been the ARCA Series, or what is the ARCA Series, and the Nascar Camping World Truck Series. And while I was growing up, I got to travel with him during the summers, or when I could count my parents to let me get out of school to come with them. And, you know, kind of watched that and was enjoying that and being a part of growing up in the sport. And I guess it was from watching my dad and kind of idolizing the things that he did and the successes that he had that really grew my love of the sport and got me to where I'm at here today. So, you know, I think that's what makes the Hall of Fame so important to the sport is, you know, it's the history of the sport that has gotten us where we're at today. And I think you have to, before you can know where the sport's going, you have to know where it's been. And that's what the Hall of Fame's all about.
I could have done a better commercial than that. I didn't even ask you to say that. That's pretty cool. If anybody has questions, we've got...
Well, that's how you know I mean it, if you didn't have to ask me.
I do. You know, and when you think about fathers, and folks, if you do have a question, Monica has the microphone. You think about dads, and you know, think about one of the guys who was the predecessor to your ride, Rusty Wallace, and his dad.
Does he have a car?
Not now. He did when we first opened. We had one of his Kodiak Pontiacs from when he won that All-Star race. And one of the things that we talked to Rusty, Mike, and Kenny about yesterday, we've got an area we call Honoring Our Legacy that honors those who built the sport of NASCAR, who are really responsible for being there, but aren't with us anymore, and asked if they would be kind enough to give us a picture of Russ Wallace to put in that area, because Russ Wallace, I call him the old man of the mountain, was one of those guys that won a ton of short track races, you know, and a lot like your dad, who never raced consistently at the Sprint Cup level, but
he made one start. One start is all he made, and he drove for, some of you guys might remember this guy's name was Jimmy Means, was the car he drove. And you know Jimmy Means?
Oh yeah.
Jimmy might even have something in here, but yeah, made one start at the Cup level. And I always wondered what would have happened if my dad had a chance at the Cup level, but he never got there.
So many guys like that you wish would have gotten that opportunity. So we got questions from our guests.
Right down here.
Being from the Detroit area, I've seen Ron Keselowski race many times at Flat Rock Speedway. What relation is Ron to you, and did you ever race at Flat Rock Speedway?
I've been to Flat Rock Speedway quite a few times. That's up in Michigan, for those of you that are asking or curious. Ron is my uncle, and my dad is Bob. And, you know, to kind of give a little backstory on that, my uncle raced in Grand National Series, which is now what we would call Sprint Cup, in the early 70s, late 60s, right after he got back from Vietnam. And so the two of them, you know, my uncle raced, and my dad worked on his cars. And my dad at that time was about 18 years old. And he helped my uncle race for, you know, probably 10 years or so until it had to be around 75, 76. I guess it wasn't quite 10 years, but it was something like that. And, you know, when that kind of ran its course and my uncle decided, hey, he didn't want to drive anymore, my dad started driving. So by then he was in his late 20s. And the significance of that, actually he was 29. And that's the significance of why I run the car number 29 on the Truck Series. That's been my family's number since day one, because the first race my dad ever ran, they asked him for his car number, and he couldn't think of anything, so he just went with his age, 29, and that's where the 29 came from. And so, I bet you didn't know that. So,
I knew the number he drove, but I had no idea.
yeah, that's where the 29 came from. So, ironically enough, now Kevin Harvick drives the 29 in Cup and has the 2 in the Truck Series, and I have the 29 in the Truck Series and the 2 in the Cup Series. So, kind of ironic how that all worked out. But that number has always had a large family legacy. But you know, my dad and uncle, though, they worked together, and then they flipped, you know, from driver crew chief. And my dad raced from, it would have been the early 80s, late 70s, up until the late 90s with that car number. But, you know, those two were always together and had their brotherly love moments. And it was because of that I'm here where I'm at today.
Ooh, got another question here.
Congrats on getting a sponsor for Parker next year.
Thank you.
And I was wondering, what attracted you to hire Parker as your driver for your truck team?
Well, I watched Parker run a little bit in the ARCA series, you know, where he won some races. And Parker Clearman is my driver in the truck series, for those of you that don't know. And so I watched him, and he won a lot of races. And what really caught my attention was when he went to Kansas and made his first start in the Nationwide Series, and he went out there and he was fast qualifying, and you know, in his first start. And I thought that was really, really impressive. And so I knew that I wanted to do something with him, because you want to be surrounded with talent, whether that's other drivers or whatnot on your own team. And so I knew he could get the job done based on what I saw there, and you know, just took a little while to get the right opportunities for him with the truck team and so forth, but now it's all up and rolling, and I feel like he can run fast, and hopefully as he matures, he can get the job done and get in the victory lane.
Hey, as somebody who has been wrecked violently before by people, not going to mention any names, what do you think about the penalties that were levied on Ron Horner, or on Kyle Busch on his actions on Ron Hornaday? Do you think people that have wrecked other people like yourself before should have had penalties like that?
He went straight for it.
Oh, wow. How long did we make it? Was that 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Third question.
Third question?
Third question.
That was actually a lot longer than I would have guessed. I would have said number 2. So I would have gone one question. Let's see. It was tough for me the first few days, because we're at the racetrack and I couldn't really think about that to really understand how I felt about it. But as I've had the time to be at home here for the last few days, or I guess I should say 48 hours, I feel pretty good about the way NASCAR handled the situation. I don't think there's any way you can handle it that makes everybody happy, because you can't go back in time and fix it. And so you can't give Ron the points back. You can't give his fabricators or mechanics or team owner the truck back, because that's destroyed. So you can't go back in time and fix it. So you're left with the only option NASCAR has, which is to do further damage by taking a guy out of the sport. And that's really tough, because obviously he has his fan base, and they all come to the racetrack to see him race. And that's not cool for their fans or for his fans. But at the same time, NASCAR, I think, did the right thing, because they had to, in racing, and you can see this right here, this is a perfect viewpoint of it. If you look at that car right there, all the way at the end, and just progress all the way around until you get to Jimmy Johnson's car over there, and you see how far the sport's come. And that's the story of our sport, it's evolution. And if you look at, the boys have at or whatever it has, it constantly evolves to the next level, next level, next level, until finally someone has to come in and say, stop. And that can be very painful. And as it pertains to what happened with Kyle, that was NASCAR's moment where they just said, stop, this is too far. And I felt like they handled it as well as you can handle it.
Do you think they...
Right over here, Brad.
Got a question over here.
Brad, what is your most unusual or memorable experience with a NASCAR fan?
And this is a family
Actually, I've got a good PG answer for this. Having Miller Lite as a sponsor, we get to do some cool things in bars. And this is PG. I'm just saying. It's going to take me a minute to get there. But I was at this bar signing autographs for Miller Lite, and they have these beer buckets. And I don't know if you guys have seen it. I'm sure you guys all know what a beer bucket looks like, but they empty them out, so they don't have the ice in them. But they empty them out and they give them away to fans so you can sign them. You'll learn later why I say they empty them out so they don't have ice in them. And so I'm doing these autographs. Now, I'm 27 years old, single. I don't have any kids that I know of. And I can't imagine what it's like to be someone who does have kids, because I've never been down that path. Let alone be that particular person that went through like 9 months of carrying that kid around. But I can only imagine that if I had a newborn baby, that I would not hand it off to somebody.
Oh, God.
Well,
I can see
this
where this is
lady
going.
went one step beyond that. She walked up to the autograph line. She was a big fan. She was great. She had this newborn that was maybe 4 or 5 weeks along. And she thought the best way to show her support was to put him in a beer bucket and have me sign him. And I just can't imagine ever being in those shoes where I felt like that was the right thing to do. And so that was my most interesting fan experience. I've never had a kid. I don't know what it's like, but I just can't
Well,
imagine.
look at me, I don't have kids either. I might be old.
I just can't imagine walking with a bucket of beer and thinking, I could put my kid in here. And maybe Brad will sign him. So
I would say of all the stories I've heard about unusual things that drivers have signed, that's got to be at the top of the list.
now I didn't sign his skin. I signed a shirt. If that makes you feel any better. But yeah, I signed his baby.
He's in a beer bucket.
In a beer bucket. A baby in a beer
Baby in
bucket.
a beer bucket.
Oh, my
And it was
God.
warm.
I'm guessing that's
It was
not going to sell real good in the gift shop.
No.
Baby in a beer bucket, I'm not sure that.
I thought for a minute I should stop because I could possibly go to jail, but then it was his parents that asked me to do it, so you think I should have stopped? Did I do the right thing by signing it?
Were you afraid she was bringing you your kid?
Now somebody's got to top that question and answer.
Hey, Brad. Have you had a chance to drive or test the new fuel-injected car yet? And if so, what do you like and not like about it? And do you think it'll change the way you run on the super speedways?
Yeah, I have had a chance to drive it, and my like list is very short and my dislike list is very long. I'm not a big fan of it at all, but you know, basically the way I feel about it, you know, we run carburetors on our cars right now, and carbureting technology is 50-some years old, basically, but it's very simple technology. It doesn't run well in bad weather. I think everybody that owns an old car can attest to that. But we don't race our cars in bad weather, so it's not an issue. And the benefit of a carburetor is that it's very, very easy to police. So if you're NASCAR, you can check it very simply and you know that it's not being cheated. And that's why NASCAR stuck with that system to date, even though it's 50-year-old technology. Now, because of all the green initiatives, et cetera, you know, the sport has taken a lot of flack from, you know, different groups that probably don't understand that. And I think they've been pressured into, through the green initiatives, switching it. But in reality, it's no more efficient than what we have, and it costs a lot more money. So I'm not a fan of it at all, to be honest.
Where do you see the sport going from here?
Ooh, that's
That's
a
kind of
tough
wide open.
That's
deep too.
That is very deep. Wow. I hope one day, I'd like to think, this is a tough question to answer. I'd like to think that we'll have a little bit of a compromise between, I think if you look at the COT car up in the top right there, and you look at the old Dale Earnhardt car there, I would like to think that maybe one day we'll come up with a compromise between the two, to where, you know, that car, that Dale drove was, probably not the safest car in the world. And the other car on the top right is pretty safe, but I think it's really ugly. So I would like to think that one day we'll have a compromise between the two. And I think we're starting to get there with, we put the spoiler on the cars, and that car's got a wing on it. And I really like this car right here, not because it's a Ford, I'm not a Ford fan, but because of the way it's got some of the character lines of what would be an actual Mustang. And I'll tell you what, I've seen the new Cup car. It's in top secret, double throwdown, lockdown mode, to where nobody's taken a picture of it yet. But I've seen the new Cup car for 2013, and I can tell you it's remarkable. It's a very, very attractive looking car. And I think we're going to get back to more of the conventional look of what you see on the street. And I think that's very good for the sport. So I'm pretty pumped about that. So I guess I have some inside knowledge. I don't know if I was supposed to share that or not, but
We won't
keep it a
tell.
secret. How about that?
Got another one back here?
Yep, way back here.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, what's up? You're waiting for Dale Jr., aren't you?
Yep. Nation.
You're like most of the crowd.
And your second career option was detective, right?
Was that?
Your second career
Detective,
option
yes.
would have been detective if you hadn't been a race car driver.
Yeah, I don't think they have a profession for smartasses, so they're probably been detective. The hat I haven't found it yet. I'm sorry, go ahead. You're waiting.
I just wanted to know, how did you start your career, in NASCAR? Because I want to be a NASCAR driver myself.
Sure. Well, I started my career as kind of a ground rat for my dad and his stuff. I can remember the first time he let me work on a race car, how cool I thought it was. And looking back, I really wasn't doing anything. I was cleaning the car and things like that. But to me, I was like, he won this week, it was me. But I started out doing those things. And I had this opportunity as I was growing up. Another kid I was just friends with, his dad gave him a quarter midget, which is like a go-kart, so to speak. And he was a couple years older than me, and he outgrew it. So he had this car sitting there, and his son couldn't race in it. And, my buddy was like, hey, why don't you try driving this? And so we convinced his dad to let me race it. And that was really how I got started. Quarter midget is essentially Little League for race car drivers. So I started driving that and grew up and started racing, local levels. And each level as I went, I had some success, which gave me, another opportunity. And much like a ladder, just climbed up it until I got to where I'm here today. So, for me, it all started at the quarter midget level and then to the local level. And next thing I knew, I had a truck ride, and that didn't go so well. But I ended up getting my best opportunity. What really accelerated my career was driving for Dale Earnhardt Jr. So he gave me an opportunity to drive what was the Navy car in late 2007, and that really parlayed my career to the next level. So it's just a series of steps and good breaks and capitalizing on opportunities.
What was it that Dale Jr. told you he saw in you that gave you that opportunity? Because there have been several times that drivers have given other drivers opportunities that folks say, okay, I haven't seen anything there. And it's worked out. You look at Jimmy Johnson and what Jeff Gordon saw in you. I think you're a perfect example of that. What was it Dale Jr. saw in you on the racetrack? He said, this guy can drive a race car if he gets the chance.
Well, I remember the first time I met Dale Jr. You probably could ask him that question when he comes back here. But I remember the first time I met him was at Bristol, and somehow our cars were parked beside each other. I can't remember the whole story. And I think what really got his attention was that I got out of the car and was fiddling with something on it. And I think that really got his attention, being able to work on them and know how they actually work. And from there, I had a couple decent races. I'm not going to say good races, but decent races in lower level equipment. And he was going through some struggles with his team at the time, and I think it just kind of all came together.
Timing's everything. Did you say you had another one back there?
Hi, Brad. Let me just first of all start off by saying I get really aggravated by the way NASCAR keeps letting you be the punching bag for so many other guys out there. Honestly, especially because of whenever Kyle Busch wrecked you in the Nationwide Series at Bristol and got the sweep, which I think should have an asterisk next to it. He should have won a Nationwide race. But anyway, as far as my question, I noticed that you accidentally backed up into the 11 car on pit road over the weekend.
It was accidental.
Yeah.
Everybody laughing like it wasn't. It was accidental.
No. I truly believe that was accidental. And I'm just curious, do you think Domi actually thinks it was accidental, or do you think he's going to try to take you out later on?
No, I think we're cool. We actually had, those of you that are on Twitter know that I'm on there a lot. And we actually talked on there a little bit. And I think he knows that it was a mistake. So I think we're all good there. But maybe not. Who knows? I guess that's why I got to watch the races. To be honest, I was madder at Ryan Newman because he kind of started the chain. But sometimes that's just racing, and it can get frustrating when you let the emotions get the best of us. But that's racing.
Right over here.
What do you think of the draft in Talladega? What do you think they can do to stop it?
How to stop the two-car draft? Well, that's a tough question. I don't know if there's really a lot of answers to it. The big thing about it, we never really saw this before with the older style cars, and I think that's because they were smaller. They didn't punch as big a hole in the air. And so I think if we're really going to fix it, you've got to do two things. You've got to get rid of that big hole in there. It's driving a school bus, it's got a big hole in there. And you got to take away some of the grip. And these tracks, Daytona and Talladega, have both been recently repaved. And that gives us a lot of grip to where we can push that car in front of them and, for the most part, not wreck them. Sometimes we do, but for the most part, not wreck them, and that's what makes that work. So, I'm interested as well that the new car for 2013 has a different nose on it that kind of comes to a point. So I don't think you'll be able to push with that car. So I think NASCAR's kind of got somewhat of an answer coming to that. It might not be as soon as next year, but I think there's an answer coming. It's just down the line. But the key factors are to not have the big hole in the air and to not be able to make contact without wrecking the car in front of you. Those are the two key factors.
The first time that I think the rest of the NASCAR world recognized the two-car draft was with you and Carl in the 2009 race at Talladega. I seem to recall that some guys were experimenting with it maybe in 2008. Sure. But at what point during that Talladega race did you guys start doing that? Because I honestly don't remember. Was it toward the end of the race, or were you guys doing that earlier to get behind? What happened to connect you guys at that point?
Well, it's kind of fun how it all played out because, I was driving for Dale Jr. at the time, and we hadn't seen a lot of the two-car drafting, but we'd seen it a couple times to varying success. But we hadn't seen it in a race. We'd seen it in practice, and it was kind of weird. So I was talking to Dale Jr. about it, and I was just before we went to Talladega for the Nationwide race, and we were teammates for that race, and I felt pretty confident that he was going to do that to me, where I was going to be the front car. And I was pretty damn nervous about it. And so, hey, before this happens, you need to explain to me what's going on. And he explained it a little bit, and not really to my satisfaction. So I was like, why don't we just not do that? And the way the race played out, it never ended up working to where we could make it happen. And so I had a bad finish in that Nationwide race the day before. And I felt like part of the reason was I had chickened out. And, the next day I was running the Cup car, and it wasn't for points. I was just running a couple of races. I'm like, well, I'm not going to chicken out. I'm going to win this race, so I'm going to wreck. And so I had the opportunity early in the race to kind of experiment with it. And so I found a couple guys who maybe weren't so willing to work with me, and I made them work with me, and did what I did with Carl there, and pushed him for a lap or two until I kind of figured it out. And then I just, like, all right, when the end of the race comes, I'll be ready. And so the race kind of played down to the end. And I had Casey Mears in front of me. And so I got up to Casey Mears, and I'm like, all right, this is going to be the deal. And I started pushing him. And he stuck his hand out the window and pulled over, like, all the way to the right side. He's like, get away from me, get off. And I'm like, oh, I guess this isn't going to work. And I think he was like, oh, this rookie's not going to do that to me. He's going to wreck us both. So I pulled back down in line and passed Casey. And while I was passing Casey, something had happened to Carl in front of me. I can't remember what. And so I caught up to him, and I just ran right into the back of him. And he just got a hold of the wheel and drove it, And so the two of us were just driving, and he's up there, and I could see him wheeling away. And it was harder to do on the older Cup car than it is the newer Cup car. The one with the spoiler. The one with the spoiler is really easy. But with the wing, it was even harder to do. And so, he's up there, Carl, and he's wheeling it and doing all these things. And next thing I knew, we were driving to the front. And I guess it ended okay. Depending on what side.
For 50% of
For 50% of the field was happy with that. Well, the two-car tango, at least.
Okay, got time for one more question.
Okay, here's our last question.
Hey, Brad.
Hey, what's up, bud?
From the few glances I've seen at racing, do you, as fast as you all go, do you ever get nervous or possibly scared behind the wheel?
Ooh, that's a tough question. You have moments where you got like that, how do you answer? I'm going to think about it. You have moments where it's like you're crossing the street, and you know that you got like the walk sign, and then you look over your shoulder and there's that guy who's not slowing down, like this car's coming at you, it's not slowing down, I'm pretty sure he's going to stop, but I'm going to watch him just to make sure. So you have moments like that. So I don't think you're really scared, but you're just, you're alert. How about that? So you have more moments where you're alert than not. I had a few moments where I would say I was pretty nervous. I got in a real bad wreck about 2 months ago in testing, actually, in this track in Atlanta. It's a road course called Road Atlanta. And I was running around, I was going down the front stretch. We were going about 155. And I entered this corner, and I don't know if any of you guys have been to Road Atlanta, I'm going to assume not. But I entered this corner that was probably a 60 or 70 mile an hour corner. And out in front of it, there was just this really short runoff. And so I entered this corner, and I went down and went to use the brakes and the downshift and do all that stuff. And I didn't have a brake pedal. And so I'm staring head on at this wall, and I'm not going to make this corner, but I'm going to hit this wall head on. And I somehow got the car to where I was slowed down to maybe 101 mile an hour, something like that, and I hit this wall almost perfectly head on. And I can say that was the most nervous I've ever been, because I didn't think I was going to walk away from that one. Well, I guess I didn't, but I hobbled away from it. I can say that was probably the most nervous I ever was in a race car. But yeah, I think every driver has a moment, and some have more than others. I've had a few more than I guess I'd like to care for, but for the most part, in a normal race, when you're just doing your thing, if you're scared, you can't drive. If you're worried about something's going to happen to me, or today's my day, you shouldn't be in a race car. And you do things when you're nervous or scared that actually puts you in more trouble than if you just got up on the wheel and drove it. So for the most part, I think I do all right with that. But I've had my moments for sure, and most of them had come in moments where I couldn't control what was going on. So just try to always be in control and don't have that problem, right?
Before we wrap up and let Brad go over here and talk to our friends from the media, you get the last word for our fans.
Last word?
You get the last word.
Wow.
Whatever's on your mind.
This is a lot of pressure. Well, I think so far this has been a great season, not just for myself, but for the sport. I think we're going to see one of the best championship battles we've ever seen. The last few weeks may not have gone the way we wanted to be a part of it, but we've had a great season. very proud of that, and thankful for everyone's support. Hope you guys are enjoying your time here at the Hall of Fame. And, oh yeah, up next, Dale Jr.
How about a big round of applause for the driver?
Thanks, guys.